across an old object, a dusty old book maybe, and you can't help but wonder about the person who made it. And every now and then, the story behind the pages is way more fascinating than what's written on them. Today, we've got one of those stories. It all kicks off with this. Just look at it. It's this delicate, thread-bound collection of classical Chinese poetry published way back in 1946. It's in amazing condition, a quiet little time capsule of careful calligraphy and deep, thoughtful verse. The title is Qin Xuan Shi Cun, which basically means the surviving poems of Qin Xuan. Now, when you see something like this, you immediately picture a certain type of person, right? A quiet scholar, probably hidden away his whole life with his books and his ink. But, well, that's not even half the story. So, who was the man behind these elegant words? Let's start with the person everyone thought he was. Let's start with the poet. The pages themselves are just filled with this beautiful vertical script. This is pure classical Chinese poetry, steeped in tradition and reflection. This was clearly the work of a true man of letters, a traditional scholar who was living through one of the most chaotic periods in Chinese history. And here he is. His name was He Qinqiao. He was born in 1872, and by all accounts, he was exactly what you'd expect. A teacher, a scholar, a man who poured his life into creating and preserving classical literature. A respected figure for sure, but maybe a man of the past. And that's right where this story takes a really fascinating turn. Because believe it or not, this quiet poet had a whole other secret, very public life. He was also a revolutionary. Now check this out. The very same hand that wrote those delicate traditional poems also helped launch this, the Xinhui Xingbao, which translates to the Xinhui Awakening Post. In 1912, He Qinqiao co-founded and became an editor for a modern, progressive newspaper. And this wasn't just some small-town paper. No, their mission, stated loud and clear, was not about making a profit. It was about awakening the consciousness of the people. You gotta remember, this was right at the dawn of the Republic of China, a time of massive social and political upheaval. And this newspaper was meant to be right in the thick of that revolution. And this right here just says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you have the quiet, personal, classical world of poetry. And on the right, the loud, public, totally modern world of journalism. The scholar and the activist, all wrapped up in one person. So how did he pull it off? So how on earth did a radical project like this even get off the ground? Well, it started with a whole lot of passion and very, very little money. Get this, the entire starting capital for the newspaper was just 40 yuan. He Qinqiao and two other teachers each pitched in 10 yuan from their own small salaries. There were no big investors, no wealthy backers. They just believed so strongly in the power of information that they pooled what little they had to make it happen. Now, the newspaper's life was like a flash in the pan, incredibly intense but brief. It was founded in 1912 and only lasted about 3 years before it had to shut down in 1915. It actually wasn't until decades later, in 1946, that his timeless collection of poetry finally got published. So what made this little 40 yuan newspaper so special? What was its voice really like? Okay, so this is the absolute game changer. Unlike the fancy, scholarly poetry he wrote, the newspaper was written in vernacular Chinese, basically the everyday language that people actually spoke. This was a hugely radical move. It meant you didn't have to be a highly educated scholar to read it. Anyone could pick it up and understand the news and ideas that were shaping their country. And they were not shy about the kinds of topics they covered. The paper took on modern issues head-on. For instance, they published articles that pushed for reformed marriage customs, trying to move people away from old traditions. They were actively trying to build a new society, one article at a time. And to make sure people kept coming back, they packed their 4 daily pages with a huge mix of content. Sure, you had your serious local news and editorials, but they also included short stories, serialized novels, and even fun stuff like lantern riddles. It was designed to be a part of everyone's daily life. So how do we put these two pieces together, the classical poet and the modern journalist? Were they really two separate identities? Well, when you start to look at his other work, like these educational booklets here, a much clearer picture begins to emerge. You see, his entire life, his entire career, was really about communication and education. It didn't matter if it was through a classical poem, a children's textbook, or a newspaper editorial, the goal was always the same, to share knowledge and ideas. So in the end, the poet and the journalist weren't two different people at all. They were just two sides of the same mission. You could say he used the fleeting, urgent ink of newsprint to try and shape the present, and the enduring, reflective ink of poetry to make sense of a lifetime of incredible change. His whole incredible story was basically hiding in plain sight, captured in two totally different kinds of print. It really leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? How many other amazing stories of revolution and reflection are just sitting there right now, waiting for someone to find them on our own library shelves?